чужим діткам дулі-дулі.
ArtTable is an organization with a 40-year history and her story of advancing the leadership of women in the visual arts.
ArtTable for me has always been a place for connection.
I have seen, upfront and personal, how ArtTable has supported a huge field of diverse women at all stages of their careers across the globe.
ArtTable is a platform, a network, and a space for women identified arts workers to grow, to collaborate, and to learn alongside each other.
ArtTable is necessary, important, strong, and fearless.
ArtTable means to me a confirmation of belonging.
ArtTable helped me discover my own potential.
It's a fun way to listen to inspiring speakers, to see great art, and to keep learning and growing.
ArtTable's programming fosters and encourages curiosity, strengthening and broadening our expertise.
It's all about women having a seat at the table to share their experiences, their knowledge, and what they want to do in the future.
I've met so many incredible, incredible women through ArtTable, and I am so grateful. Thank you, ArtTable, and happy belated 40th birthday.
Wow, that right there was a really neat video. It looked apparently to be the 40th anniversary for ArtTable. And I'm really happy. I've got the Lila Harnett, Executive Director, Jessica Porter here to talk about ArtTable and their brand new partnership with the Blue Marble, which is a Stellar-based platform where they are raising funds to go towards this incredible mission that we're going to learn more about through NFTs. Jessica Porter, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good, thank you. And thank you for showing that video. I forget how much it just makes me smile. I feel like it's something I should watch, on the hard days.
Yeah, yes. Why don't we start off? When I was introducing you, it was your title is the Lila Harnett Executive Director. Why don't you share with us a little bit of who Lila Harnett is?
Yeah, so Lila Harnett is ArtTable's founder. She founded ArtTable in 1980, and I am the first executive director named after her, which is really incredible. That happened, I think, 2-3 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. Why don't we start off before we go into this new NFT partnership that you all have going on, with a little background on ArtTable for those that may be unfamiliar.
Yeah, sure. So ArtTable was started by Lila Harnett in 1980, who was working in the field of art, but in art publishing. And she was meeting a lot of people in the art world, and she saw that men had a lot of clubs and resources that related back to their positions in the art world, but she didn't see the same resources being available to women in the field. So she started inviting women in different roles in the art world to come and discuss and network and troubleshoot issues in the art world, and just basically working around a table with these women and providing that network and helping them to grow their careers. And this expanded into having a membership organization nationwide and then eventually internationally. And then about 20 years in, it started to expand a bit more.
Wow. So I mean, internationally, about approximately how many members are make up ArtTable?
About 1,200.
Wow. And it's so important what you're talking about, and a lot of the folks I know that follow this podcast, we typically talk a lot about blockchain and crypto, and a lot of times I feel like when we talk about NFTs, people want to look at it within like a box, right? That it's something separate. But at the end of the day, this is art. These are creatives, these are art, and I know especially within the Stellar community, we're fortunate to have a lot of female artists that make up our community. And so I think it's great. When you mentioned a little while ago that there are a lot of these sort of there were a lot of these clubs and these organizations kind of geared towards men. What are some of the hurdles that you've seen through your own experience that women face within the art field that make ArtTable such a dynamic addition to the community?
It's a good question. I don't think the art world is particularly unique in terms of the issues that women are facing, right? There's pay equity, which is the big one that comes to mind, being
pay equity. What is that? I haven't heard that one.
We're being paid less than men generally across the field. And the gap is even larger for women of color in our field and across the board. And so that's a really big issue. ArtTable really was founded in order to make those connections for each other. So in terms of gathering women, initially you had to have 5 years experience to be a member, 5 years experience in a leadership role, like as a curator or an art dealer or a museum professional in some way. And so it was really about gathering those resources and helping each other out. Literally a seat at the table. And I think that's what has been missing for a lot of women across all industries, is having a voice and a seat at the table. And that's what ArtTable was trying to change, especially in 1980.
Wow. So what are some of the, initiatives that ArtTable has done and has been utilizing to really help with the mission?
Yeah, the one that I'm most proud of that has had a lot of change in the last few years is our fellowship program. And that one focuses on placing women from underrepresented backgrounds and those who identify as women into major institutions across the US for specific projects. So for example, a major museum might have a very specific project about an artist or an upcoming exhibition that they're working on. And we would find a fellow for them who has some expertise, some background in learning about this, and place them in the institution. And so we end up paying the fellow, and we also pair them with an ArtTable member who can be their mentor throughout the program. And most of the time, ArtTable mentors, stay with their mentees throughout their career. And so it's really about a lifetime connection of connecting women very early in their career in order to have that throughout. And then we also do things like career roundtables and other mentoring projects.
Yeah. No, I think that's really big. And with the advent of NFTs, kind of definitely growing. I mean, it shows, and we'll talk a little bit about your partnership. But I'm curious. I mean, how have you seen this start to enter? Because I would imagine that in the beginning, maybe like everybody else, it might have looked at just like a fad, something that might just go away. But are you starting to see more experienced artists starting to take this a lot more serious? And that's one question. But then I guess addition to that is, what sort of, I guess questions have been arising as this whole entire new industry has been growing?
Yeah, for sure. I think the big question in the art world is it here to stay? Right? Is this something, or, back in the day, people argued whether or not photography was really art. And now, spend major amounts of money collecting photography and editions. And, this isn't that different. But it is interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to see that happen. And we've been hosting some programs trying to inform our community about it, because people just really want to learn, and they want to learn from various perspectives, like, whether they're dealing in it, like selling, or whether they're collecting, or whether they're just working with artists and advising them. We're trying to get the education part out there so that people are learning about this kind of new thing.
Right. Because I feel as if, like, with a lot of NFT artists today, you're starting to see a lot of these questions pop up. Royalties and how does that work, and licensing. For these new artists that are out there, I would say number one, try to get in contact with ArtTable. But number two, what would be some general advice that you would give some of these artists out there, because like you said, I think that's a great example with photography that, people at the photography, was it here to stay or not? And obviously it did. We might be seeing the same thing with NFTs. So what sort of advice would you give new aspiring artists?
Yeah, well, I used to work with artists, so, I do always think about them, directly in terms of marketing and whatnot. It's kind of like when the internet became this amazing platform for artists to show their own work, and everyone asked the question, oh, do we still need galleries? Do we still need this? Do we still need that? And this question always comes up, whether or not you do or don't. But artists really have an opportunity right now in the NFT market to enter it, because there's so much transparency and access in terms of doing that, no matter who you are. And the bar is kind of low in terms of doing that. So you can get a ton of exposure, and it's not just exposure in the art world. It's exposure that's much, much broader than that, because the buying pool for NFTs is larger and has expanded beyond what we would think of as your normal art collectors.
Right. So let's take a pause and let's go into this partnership here. Yeah. So this is the Blue Marble website and portal. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how this whole partnership came into play?
Yeah, well, we started a relationship with Alice Riot during the pandemic and during our 40th anniversary celebration, and they were doing a lot of really great work with women artists, with making masks and making scarves, and we had partnered with them in that way. And then we realized that they were starting to enter the NFT markets. We had started to have discussions around what that would look like and what that could be for ArtTable, and they generously offered this NFT to us in terms of fundraising. And we were talking about it right around our annual benefit, which was last month, and here we are about a month later, launching it, which is really great and really fast, and kind of shows how amazing this process is.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I myself, just last night, I went on and I purchased this drop, and it's got a great write up here. It says utility. It's the first ever NFT drop for ArtTable, the world's foremost professional organization dedicated to advancing the leadership of women in the visual arts. Each time the Mina NFT is sold or resold, it raises sustaining funds for ArtTable's nonprofit programs, initiatives, and more that benefits its members worldwide. I think this is really neat. And so as folks that are able to watch, you'll see that this is actually right now minted on the Stellar Network. You can actually look at the issuer ID and everything there. It gives you the actual number. Now, what I'm showing is my actual wallet here. This is my wallet where I purchased it at. And so it shows you what offers are in. You can buy it with any major credit card. And you can actually see all the different purchasers as it lists down here, which is really exciting and great to see. And this was actually used with Blue Marble, which utilizes a turrets system that actually allows for things like royalties and payments to go through for nonprofit organizations. What are some of your goals, you'll say, I mean, for those listening, to utilize these funds for? Like, what are some initiatives that this could help fund?
Yeah, well, we're a nonprofit 501c3, so everything that we do ends up being given back in terms of programming or our fellowships or anything like that. But what we have been focusing on is really expanding those fellowships that I mentioned before, and also our programming in terms of educating and bringing in more resources so that we're sharing those and putting them back out into the art world, and for women in the field to really be able to rely on those resources to move their careers forward, and then in turn mentor those entering behind them. So it's really, it's a wonderful cycle of what ArtTable has developed over the last 42 years.
Wow, incredible. And you yourself, I remember we talked earlier, you had a history working in the art world, directly. Why don't you share a little bit about some of your background? Because I always find that it's so powerful when individuals that are leading organizations have experience, and can really understand what artists are going through. So if you can share a little bit about that, that'll be great.
Yeah, I started out as a curator, and then I worked in the art shipping industry for a bit, and then I disappeared and went to law school. And then, with the sole purpose of knowing that I would come back and re-enter the art world. And when I did, I came back onto the market side and ended up in galleries, and then opened my own gallery here in New York, which I had for 11 years. And that was really the bulk of working with artists directly for those 11 years, which is amazing. I mean, artists, right now at ArtTable, even though our membership is not directly artists, none of us would have a job if it wasn't for artists, right? Like, we're all working with artists in some way or art. So it's really amazing to have those 11 years of experience of just working with incredible artists from around the world. And then I ended up working as an executive director at another organization that was artist-based, which was New York Artists Equity Association.
Nice. And with galleries, I mean, with the digital art scene that's growing, how do you see that being impacted? I mean, do you think it'll give it more exposure? What do you feel? Because I kind of look at, let's say, the streaming industry, right? And in many ways, there was a direct impact with music sales. But on the other end, it gave so much more exposure to artists and to brands because their reach was so much more. What are your thoughts in the future of galleries with the rise of digital art?
It's going to be really interesting. So since the NFT kind of craze, I've certainly, looked at my own experience and been like, would I want to own a gallery right now? I'm not sure. Because you have to pivot, and it is a different mindset. The gallery world specifically is not transparent, right? It's an industry. It's, we refer to it as like the Wild West, and there aren't a lot of guidelines. People are doing their own thing, but this level with NFTs, like you were pointing out when you showed us your wonderful purchase, thank you, is that transparency, right? So you can see everyone bought it, where that's not the case normally. If you're going to buy, a work of art, normally like a painting, no one knows that you've bought it unless it's like a large auction item that's, made it to the public news in some way. But it's such a private thing that we've now made kind of public in this way, and just added this level of transparency. It's interesting. You're like, they're buying an NFT. That's so fascinating.
And that's interesting because, so much in the, I guess in the crypto world, right, is these NFTs are like, status symbols in many different ways. There's so many of these big things, and people want to show off that they have these NFTs. They want to show their NFT. They want to hype up their NFTs. So it is interesting to see how that collides, as you mentioned, because from what I'm learning from you today is that the traditional art world is actually more so private than anything. That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, and with all the transparency, how that's going to work out.
Right, and the price, right? Like you can see who purchased it, but also the price they paid for it. And that is something that, as a former gallerist, I would never share. That's private information,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe hopefully, as the world kind of evolves, because I mean, I think that in the beginning side of NFTs, so much emphasis was put on resale value, right? But that's not really where art began. It really began with the artist, and like I had a chance to visit the Louvre not too long ago. And I mean, I was just starstruck to be around so much art, so much beauty, so much time that was put into these pieces of work that have literally lasted the test of time. And I hope that the NFT world doesn't weaken that. That people don't just look at just getting art out really quickly, and we maintain that glory. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's kind of my feeling.
I would hope not as well. I mean, it seems like you wouldn't want to, I don't know, minimize that importance. When we think of art as being like, oh my gosh, oh wow, I own this, right? This is incredible. But in terms of resale rights, what's interesting is, we in the US have been pretty behind the times in terms of like resale rights for artists. That's another beautiful thing about NFTs that you just touched on, is that you can, like, artists sell something privately through their gallery, and then the next time it sells from that private owner through an auction, and the artist doesn't see any of that money, right?
Right.
Just the seller. So with NFTs, you can divert those funds back to the artist, even when it resells, which is a really kind of nice concept. And, you mentioned the Louvre, but in France, you get some resale rights for artists as well. But maybe that's going to be a positive turn here, as people start thinking about how beneficial that is for artists.
Right. Because I think you make a great point. I mean, so much of our experience as humans really come from artists of all kinds, whether they're musicians, they're illustrators, photographers. I mean, so much of what we consider the greatness of living is the experiences that we gain from artists. And how many times have we heard of artists that they pass away and they're broke? And so it would be neat if, let's say, an artist can have 10% go back to the ArtTable, for example, so their legacy can be raised there, or whatever cause that they feel is necessary, a family fund or whatnot. I think that would be the positive note that will end there on the possibilities of NFTs and where we can go. So on ArtTable, for those that are listening, they want to get involved, they want to donate. You're a 501c3. What is the best way to get in contact with yourself or ArtTable for more information?
Yeah, website arttable.org is the best way. You can donate directly there. And also find ways to get involved if they wanted to volunteer, if they wanted to become a member, if they're a person identifying as a woman and work in the art world, then they will qualify to be a member of ArtTable.
Nice. Well, I definitely will stay in touch. I mean, I love what you guys are doing, and happy to help in any way that we can to further exposure and make sure that ArtTable is around for another 40 years.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. I don't know if I'll be here for the entire 40 years. We'll be sure.
We'll be sure. Well, thank you everybody for joining in. Make sure to visit ArtTable. Once again, you can get in contact with thebluemarble.io and get a piece of this NFT that is going to help to be part of your participation and your contribution to the ArtTable and all that they do. For Stellar Global, this is Sam, and we've got Jessica Porter signing off on this podcast. Thank you for joining. Take care.
Thank you.